Welcome back to the Resale Stack. I'm Jackie, the CEO and co-founder of Trendful.
Hi, and I'm Mailys, the CTO and co-founder of Trendful as well.
So I find this topic today so interesting and so important to understand as a resale merchant. So today we are diving into how resale merchants source their inventory. So a little background, unlike traditional retail where restocking can be somewhat easy, secondhand inventory is quite unpredictable.
Yeah, that's why having a strong sourcing strategy is critical. So let's break down the main ways that merchants find inventory.
So yeah, in traditional retail, you have suppliers that you can, reorder products from, and you can easily order multiple sizes or quantities even of the same item. But in resale, that's not really possible.
Yeah, inventory really depends on what's available. And as you know, with pre-owned items, no two items are exactly the same. So merchants really need to get creative in sourcing.
Yes.
And there are like multiple ways that they've already been creative. So there are four ways to source inventory. A first like big way is wholesale companies.
Yeah, there's lots of benefits to wholesale companies too. You can source a higher volume of inventory. You can maybe even find multiples of a similar, brand or style that you're interested in. So if you're a business and you have lower inventory in Louis Vuitton, but like you really want to stock up more in Louis Vuitton, it's a way for you to be able to source more quantity of that brand or style. Um, yeah, so there's lots of benefits associated with wholesale.
Yeah, and I know based on your size, there are multiple platforms for wholesale where you can either pick and choose what models you want, or if you scale and you don't necessarily have the time to pick and choose, some wholesale companies will work with you and will create package based on what you have liked in the past and will send you maybe 50 items per week if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, it's very I feel a bit flexible too. It's really dependent on, yeah, like you said, size of the business that's inquiring with them and just like the type of inventory that you need from them too. There are not necessarily downsides, just things to think about as you also scale your business is that acquiring from wholesale can also be more expensive too down the line. It's not going to be as cost effective to scale using only wholesale businesses for your inventory model. And it really depends also what company you're sourcing from too.
Yeah, not all wholesale companies are the same. I know that some wholesale companies they're really curating their own inventory. So you could find very popular items, but especially find items in very good conditions. And you have other wholesale companies that might offer you products with lower price points, but the condition is more between good and fair. So you have to know what type of items you want to resell on your platform as well.
Yeah, and you really have to learn their way of describing condition too, because wholesale has a different kind of way of describing condition than just excellent, great, good, and fair that you see resale merchants typically using. They have like a whole grading system, and it's really good to inquire, try to figure out where they're also getting their inventory from. Are they authenticating it for you or are they sending it and you still need to authenticate the items? It's just those are things that you need to think of when sourcing from wholesale.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually thinking about something, and that's something that I'm not sure about. I don't know if every wholesale you can return the item. Like, let's say, for example, it's not the condition that you were expecting because you didn't understand the condition grading, or you couldn't see everything in the pictures online. Are you able to always return the item? I am not sure, but that's something a merchant needs to know.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely something when we started Trendful and we were a resale business, we started to source from wholesale as well. But we didn't take it as far as some businesses do with how much inventory they acquire from from wholesale companies.
Yeah. And well, if you know like good wholesale companies, you can also share it with us and like share it in those videos. But besides wholesales, there are other great sources to find very peculiar sometimes items at a low price, but that might get trickier on how you find them. So there are auctions and estate sales. I know that Jackie is a specialist about auctions, so I'm gonna let you talk on that one.
Well, there's also a different like set of auctions too. Like there's the auctions that even wholesale businesses acquire from based in like Japan, but there's also auctions here in the US that you can source. You can sometimes find really great designer items at that, but it definitely takes more time and it's a much more manual process. The same with estate sales. Like you can sometimes find some really great inventory designer items for low cost at estate sales. But you really have to like pick those items. You have to really sort through a lot of inventory or estate sales to find items. So you definitely have less volume that you can find in this way. And it can take longer to find those items, but it's definitely a lower entry point, I would say, than sourcing from wholesale, where wholesale could be slightly more, I would say, expensive than estate sales or even auctions.
Yeah, if you want, and you can always, and that's a point that I think we want to come back at later too, but you can always do a combination of sourcing some wholesale and sourcing some items from auction or estate sales. So you can mitigate the money that you invest in the product before reselling them. Because with estate sales, that will be maybe harder to find, be more time consuming, but you might find items at a very good price. Then wholesale, it's much more streamlined. You can make sure of what you can find. I don't know if you agree, Jackie.
Yeah. So estate sales, it's like we said, it's much more manual and time consuming. Something that we did when we were a resale business was we wrote like a script so that we would have like email updates sent to us about upcoming estate sales with like keywords. I think you did it right. So it was like based on certain keywords in the listing of the estate sale, we would have emails sent to us about, oh, this estate sale is coming and they have coming up and there's these keywords associated with it. So like we had like designer or handbag, I think were some keywords that we used to find estate sales, because otherwise it can kind of be a mess to find available ones in your area, and then nothing is online for estate sales, so it can be quite difficult to know if the one that you're walking into is going to have anything even there for you. So it was something that we did to save time for ourselves, but I know that most resale merchants don't have, an engineer on their side that can do that for them so that they can find more easily the right sales to go to.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have the tool to like easily have a list of estate sales that might be interesting for you. That's definitely the first website we were scraping in some ways to know like where to source inventory, and then now we scrape website to collect pricing information. But yeah, that was fun having to like go to those estate sales and find items.
The other good thing about estate sales is that you can always come back because usually they run over, like a 3 to 4 day period, usually over a weekend. And you can come back and they will have reduced prices every day. So the first day you go will be full price. And then every subsequent day, usually they have some sort of discount happening. I, I just always will remember the best story we have is that we went to an estate sale. It was like Maryland, I think. And we found a vintage Chanel blouse for $3. And I remember, I think we resold it for like, I don't know, over $300 or something for a vintage Chanel blouse. And this was like over 5 years ago, I think, that we did this. That was kind of an amazing moment. So you can find some really great gems for your company at estate sales. It's very hit or miss on what you do find.
Yeah, and I remember this Chanel blouse. It was in a mix of other things, so you really had to like go search in corners to like find a pearl. But I also remember other estate sales where you really had to go quick because there were other people around that also wanted designer items, either for themselves or like for their own business, but they would take everything and keep it in their arms, and you were like, are you gonna actually buy it?
Do you remember the woman with the Gucci boots that like carried them around the whole house? Because they're usually at houses. And she just carried them around, didn't even buy them, I think. She just like didn't want other people to touch them.
Yeah, so we were kind of like when we were together, like having some strategy of like, you follow that girl and I'm gonna keep searching, or you start with this room and I'm gonna start with this room. So that was fun, but that shows you, yeah, it can be a very fun thing to do in having low priced items, but it can be a hustle sometimes.
Oh, it's definitely a hustle. And I would say the messier the estate sale, the better you were to find like really big gems, or pearls, as Mailys calls them. And the more like, cleaner, curated ones were usually more expensive, and also they usually didn't have any like Chanel blouses randomly tucked away in like a pack of clothes.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know, like we mentioned wholesales, auctions, and estate sale. Something that we are also very familiar about is another way to source inventory from your customers.
Yeah, so I think one of the most effective ways to source inventory is buying directly from your customers. And we can maybe talk about kind of like the different ways in which you can source inventory from your customers.
Yeah, so there are three different ways you can acquire inventory from your customers. Either you can offer buyouts, so that means you pay upfront for items your customers want to sell to you, or you can offer consignments. So with consignment, it means you will take the items from your customers and paying them only once the item has sold. And so there is different like variation, how you could manage a consignment. You can still wait that the item is sold but offer a fixed price to the customer, or you can offer a commission based on the sale price. So there are different variations like that with acquiring inventory from the customers through consignments. And then the third option is stock credits or trade-in. So you can either offer stock credits that the customer can use to purchase another item on your website, or you can accept an item and right away give them another item. You can negotiate that way. I know that some merchants do it. So we often put stock credits and trades in the same package.
And I think definitely when resale merchants are starting out, we'll maybe see more of them starting out using buyouts primarily because You can kind of receive the item for a better price from your customer. You also, another benefit of buyouts is that you control the inventory. So it's not in your store, but you don't own it. Like with consignment, you don't own that item. It's just, you just have it there to potentially sell for your customer. But then you have to also think about other aspects, like, do you return the item after a certain number of days if you cannot sell it? So there's some benefits more with having buyouts, I would say. And that's what we traditionally see merchants starting with. And then as they scale more, we typically see them moving more and more to consignment. And then after that, we see them moving more to trade in or store credit as they have more of a flow of customers that are sellers that want to have store credit and trade in.
Yeah, exactly. A big advantage of acquiring inventory from your customers is establishing circular relationship where the customer is not only here to purchase, but they are also here to sell. And so they will keep going with you, selling and buying. And we see that with our merchants. Usually, when you acquire a customer and they have, or just a seller, they just start by selling their own item, they will keep coming back into your website and they will want to then purchase from your website because you have established this relationship of trust with them.
Yeah, so kind of the benefits of acquiring from your customers is that you have control over pricing, you create direct relationships with your customers, like Miley said, and you also even have control over authentication too, because you control the point at which you authenticate the item when it comes from your customer, rather than if you acquire it wholesale or from auctions or estate sales. And that's kind of why we have built the software that we've built to be able to help automate buyouts and consignment workflows. So making this process really seamless, because there's a lot that is entailed with acquiring from your customer base, that we want to make it as easy as possible for you to be able to receive inventory that way.
Yeah, one point actually that makes a difference between buyout and consignment is that with consignment, customers will send you a lot of emails to have updates about their items. When it comes to buyout, once they like agree to either drop off or ship the item to you and they receive their payout, it's done. You don't have to manage the customer anymore. So I know that even some merchants that have the possibility to do consignment and they are big enough now, a few decide to stay with buyout just because they like the easiness that comes with buyouts. Like where you don't have, at some point, you cut off the customer and it's just you selling the item. But definitely, like our software, make it easy no matter what you want to do. We automate email automation, etc. So if you want to look more into that topic, just feel free to reach out. But because that's a whole other conversation. But this is very interesting how merchants can move from buyout to consignment and then do store credit.
Yeah, that could be like even a whole another video conversation about the differences between buyout, consignment, and store credit, and the pros and cons of each, and why you would want one or the other, because it can really also even depend on the type of item you're acquiring too. Like you may want to acquire buyouts for certain brands or styles, and you may want to acquire items with consignment for other brands and styles. So it's really dependent on item type as well. But I think we can maybe talk a little bit about how one important thing is to note is that often a resale business sources inventory, how they source inventory changes as their business grows.
Yeah, it changed over time. I believe that, as you mentioned, they might want to start with a few wholesale items, or even start with buyouts when it comes to like sourcing from customers because it's easier to manage. But you need an inventory to start your resale business. And the easiest way is generally wholesale because you can pick and choose like a few items. Or if you like estate sales and you like kind of hustling, you can try to do that as well. And then as you grow, move towards your customers because that's what is going to enable you to scale in the long term.
Yeah, I would say even for us, when we started as a resale business, we initially even got started just sourcing items from our own closets and then decided to move. As we had success with that, we realized we needed to have a more steady flow of inventory. And for us, that meant we went down the route of estate sales before discovering wholesale because there really isn't a playbook on this, on what you should really do and how and what the steps are to start your business. And so that's the route we went. We went from our closets to estate sales and then eventually to wholesale because wholesale was kind of the next step for us to be able to have, as Miley said, larger quantities and kind of ensure that we were getting good quality inventory too, because it was very, as we mentioned, hit or miss with estate sales to get inventory that we needed. But we realized that wholesale alone wasn't fully scalable for us long term. You need to have the capital to be able to invest in those larger volumes of inventory as well, which when you're starting your business, you may not have that capital to do that. So that's why we initially started with our own closets and estate sales. But then as you kind of gain more traction, we see companies usually moving towards, at this point, customers and sourcing from your customer base. And as we mentioned, that usually starts with buyouts because it's the easiest to manage. And then as they build more of a loyal customer base and refine their operations, they will expand to consignment and then eventually trade in and store credit as well. That's just the typical process that we see companies doing, and we've seen a lot of companies do it this way. You will even see like large scale companies doing this. Like if you look at like Rebag, they were mostly a buyout only business. And then if you look now, they do consignment. And then they also recently expanded to like trade in and store credit options too. So it's not something that you just see with, small to mid-sized businesses. You see it with the larger players as well, that they eventually start from a place of buyout and then end up moving more towards consignment because that's just a more scalable option since you're not taking inventory risk.
Yeah. So that really means that as a merchant, like you don't have to feel stuck with acquiring inventory. Like you can really move to different strategies as your business grow. You can adapt as based on how your business is doing, and you can also do a mix of those different ways of acquiring inventory.
Yeah, if we look at our current clients who use Trendful, none of them only do none of them only acquire from customers. They always end up having a mix of consignment or sourcing from wholesale or auctions. That you need to do a combination of sourcing strategies. There is no one size fits all approach, I would say, to how you source inventory on the resale market.
Yeah. It's, and really, like, if you want to focus on, obviously, customer base, Trendful is here to help. We have the software. But I would be super interested in knowing, if you are listening to us, how do you acquire inventory? And even if you have any funny story on how you found a pearl, as I said earlier, where you found this amazing item for maybe a cheap price or very easily. That would
Or
be fun to know.
maybe they don't want to say. It's like their secret source, you know?
Maybe it is. Maybe there is a secret source we don't know about. Well, I would love to know, but you might not want to share it. That's okay.
That's the one thing I feel like merchants on the resale market can be very secretive. It's not very transparent on how you start a business, like what are the tools you use. Everything is kind of very secretive, and like you don't want your competition to know, so that they don't get a leg up over you. But this has been a great conversation, and yeah, I'm very excited to also know how others source inventory as well. So that's it for this episode of the Resale Stack. If you found this helpful, like, subscribe, and follow for more resale insights. Bye.
See you next time. Bye.